In the Philippines, a young daughter is the family's primary investment. Her education and a strategic marriage are the only things standing between her parents and total poverty. I was 40, a foreigner, and I didn't realize that my presence was a threat to the financial plan they had for her life. I thought we could hide our relationship in a city far enough from her village, thinking a rented room could be our own world. But in a place where relatives act like informants, privacy doesn't exist. One day, I was the man she loved. The next, I was a liability she had to delete to keep her home and her future.
Jakob sat on the edge of his bed in the small hotel room, scrolling through his laptop screen again. 40 years old. A divorce behind him, failed attempts to restart his life, disillusionment with people who spoke beautifully but rarely acted on their feelings. Europe seemed safe, convenient, but empty. Everything predictable, yet dull. The Philippines, this wasn't some exotic whim. It was hope. Hope that somewhere there remained simplicity, sincerity, that somewhere he could meet a person who wouldn't play games, test him, or manipulate him. He wasn't looking for adventure or a holiday fling. He simply wanted a woman with whom he could live, build something real, without unnecessary drama and pretense. Dating sites were tools. He quickly learned to recognize empty profiles versus genuine ones. When he came across Mary's profile, his gaze lingered longer than usual. 19 years old, modest photos, conservative clothing, calm eyes, with no hint of flirtation or showing off. A few lines about life with her parents, college studies, rare walks. Everything was simple, honest. Messaging Mary was strange and new for him. She replied briefly, cautiously, sometimes with long pauses, as if afraid to write too much. She apologized for late responses, for mistakes in English, for not knowing what to say. Sometimes her messages consisted of a single word or an emoji. For Jakob, it was unusual, but gradually he understood. This was not indifference, it was caution, shyness, fear. Each of her short messages was a small victory, a step toward realizing that beneath that fear, something genuine existed. He learned to wait, not to rush, not to ask unnecessary questions. Every morning he checked his phone, awaiting a reply. Sometimes he watched the hours pass until her message arrived, and when it did, a quiet warmth spread inside him. Small, gentle, yet real. After a few weeks, he decided to travel to the Philippines, not as a tourist, not as a passerby, but as someone wanting to understand, to see what lay behind those cautious, silent eyes. Mary's parents' house was in a remote village, 20 kilometers from Clarin. The road was dusty and narrow, tropical trees peaked between low houses, and along the way occasional motorbikes, chickens, and dogs appeared. Everything seemed foreign, yet strangely enticing. He was met by Mary's mother, who immediately put him at ease. A smile, questions about the journey, how he was settling in Panglao, an invitation inside, offering water and light food. Her attention was genuine, warm, without hidden suspicion or hidden judgment. For the first time, Jakob felt he was at least a little accepted here. Mary herself remained mostly silent. She stood or sat slightly apart, tense, hands clenched in her lap, eyes lowered. When their eyes met by chance, she quickly looked away. She was shy, reserved, yet a quiet spark of interest and trust was visible within. Her father was not home. He worked until evening. The first visit passed peacefully. No conflicts, no pressure, no discussions about the future. Jakob noticed Mary gradually becoming accustomed to her presence, and he himself was learning to understand her caution, accepting her silence as part of the trust-building process. In the evening, as he prepared to leave, Mary gave him a timid smile, tiny and quiet, yet it made his heart tighten and rejoice at the same time. He realized that nothing was decided yet, but something fragile and real was beginning to grow between them. The ride back was long and dusty. He thought of every message she had sent, each pause, how cautiously she allowed trust. He knew the journey ahead would be slow, that any misstep could break the fragile bridge they had started to build. Yet within him, hope lived quietly, cautiously, but tangibly. In that silence, in the careful correspondence, in her shy smile, he felt for the first time in a long while that he wanted to stay and fight for this feeling, even if the road would be difficult. After the first visit, Jacob left, but thoughts of Mary clung to him relentlessly. He continued messaging her. Her replies came slowly, cautiously, sometimes hours or even a full day later. Every message was a small signal of trust. He felt her shyness, her fear of her parents, but also glimpses of interest, moments when she allowed herself to be slightly more open. He wrote infrequently, careful not to pressure, choosing words cautiously, avoiding hints at anything serious or demanding. Each day he checked his phone with mild anxiety. Sometimes she answered almost immediately. Sometimes silence stretched painfully long, forcing him to reflect on every word, every emoji. A few days into this correspondence, Jacob decided he needed to visit again. The first trip had given them a chance, but the connection was too fragile to wait indefinitely. The journey to the village became a small test. He prepared for any outcome, yet inside was a quiet, cautious optimism. When he arrived, Mary's mother greeted him with gentle joy. Her smile returned, asking about the journey, how he was living, offering cool water and light food. In her eyes, he read warmth and openness. Mary stood slightly apart, still somewhat reserved, but not as tense as the first time. Her movements were careful, yet he could notice a subtle trust. She allowed her gaze to linger a little longer on him, sometimes offering a small smile when her mother looked away. The day passed slowly. Jacob observed every gesture, every shadow on her face, each hesitant glance. He saw her fear gradually yielding to curiosity as she learned to be near him without losing caution. Every tiny sign of attention, every look felt important, precious. By evening, her father returned. His steps were heavy, measured, with no hint of warmth. The atmosphere instantly chilled. Mary froze, drawing inward. Her mother fell silent. Jacob realized he was no longer in control. Any attempt to argue or explain would be futile. The father firmly indicated that Jacob could not stay the night. Her mother tried to speak, but he remained unwavering. Mary lowered her eyes, as if vanishing into a corner. Jacob understood the household operated by its own rules and that he had to respect them to preserve the fragile bridge of trust they had started building. The return ride was long. Dusty, warm night, headlights cutting through shadows, the chirping of crickets and distant dogs mingled with thoughts of Mary. He recalled her timid movements, shy smiles, how she gradually allowed herself to be near him. He reflected on their correspondence, each pause, each emoji, understanding that trust grows slowly, through small steps, through patience. Slowly but surely, he began to realize something alive and real existed between them, and it required respect, caution, and time. Any act against the household's rules could destroy it all. Yet hope persisted. Even after being turned away, he felt that the bridge remained, that there was a chance, and that he needed to proceed slowly but steadily to preserve this fragile trust. Correspondence between visits continued. Sometimes Mary replied barely, sometimes offering small hints at her thoughts and feelings. These were tiny victories, sustaining his desire to remain close. Each day he awaited her messages, endured pauses, rejoiced in each word. Between them, a connection was slowly, quietly, cautiously forming, one that could not be rushed and had to be nurtured. Gradually, replies became rare. Pauses first stretched through a day, then several days. He wrote cautiously, trying not to pressure, hoping for a small spark of trust.
Yet the phone remained silent. Each new silence pressed heavier, making his heart contract. He felt the connection weakening, the fragile bridge they had begun constructing beginning to crumble. He attempted to reach out to Mary's sister, hoping to understand what had happened, but she too remained silent. No explanations, no hints. A growing sense of confusion and helplessness took hold. All he could do was recall her shy glances, quiet smiles, moments of trust during the visit. These memories were both comfort and pain. Weeks passed. Every day, Jakub checked his phone, hoping for a miracle, hoping Mary would suddenly write. Finally, a message arrived. Cautious and restrained, it contained an explanation. Her parents had strictly forbidden her from communicating with a foreigner. She had been given a hard choice: either follow family rules and possibly consider a local suitor, or lose family support and the chance to live peacefully. Now everything was clear. He understood why replies had grown sparse and why she had disappeared. She chose the familiar life, security, and family. The block was her way of adhering to the ultimatum, protecting herself, and not losing her home. This was not indifference or neglect, it was a necessary measure. Jakub sat on his motorbike in the evening light, feeling mixed emotions: confusion, anxiety, a dull ache, but also quiet hope. Hope that if given time and space, if careful and patient, the bridge between them might endure. He realized that all he could now do was wait, observe, respect her circumstances and family, and cherish the connection within himself as something fragile but precious. Every message from her was now a small miracle. Even in silence, when the phone remained quiet, he held on to this thread of hope, understanding that her choice had not destroyed what had begun to grow between them. He simply had to be careful and patient, step by step, if he wanted to preserve something that could become real. After Mary reached out again and explained what had happened, a strange, uneven balance settled between them. Messaging resumed, but not as before. Words carried more caution, less spontaneity. She wrote infrequently, sometimes disappearing for hours or a full day.
On Friday evening, Jakub arrived by motorbike at the college. Mary waited in the shadows, walking toward him, eyes lowered, backpack in hand. Her steps were cautious, slow, tinged with shyness, yet determined. Jakub felt each movement, each subtle sway of her shoulders, understood her inner tension, and simultaneously rejoiced that she had come of her own accord. They walked silently for a few minutes, then talked about simple things: how the day went, classes, funny incidents. Voices were quiet, unhurried, each laugh and glance testing the boundaries of trust. The cottage in the nearby hotel complex that Jakub had rented looked cozy and calm: a single-story building with a neat bed, a small table, a couple of chairs, and the soft glow of a lamp created a sense of privacy. The grounds were green and well-kept, with paths and flower beds, quiet corners to sit and talk peacefully. Inside, they initially sat side by side. Conversations were careful, gentle, about trivial things. Sometimes they fell silent, but the silence was not empty, it was filled with attention to each other. Jakub noticed her relaxing her shoulders, gradually letting go of tension, each glance catching his attention. Evening slipped into night. The wind whispered through the palms. Distant insects added a gentle soundtrack of calm. Slowly, a feeling of closeness emerged between them. They did not rush. There were no abrupt movements or pressure. Every touch was delicate, every gesture cautious. Mary was focused, attentive to herself and Jakub, taking steps consciously. For her, it was the first experience. For him, it was a moment of trust he embraced carefully. They sat on the veranda, listening to the night garden, the rustle of leaves, warm wind, and insect sounds. Silence spoke volumes. Emotions filled the space between them. No loud words, no promises, only presence, the sense that something important and fragile had occurred. By morning, Mary quietly returned to the dorm. Jakub stayed behind.
feeling both emptiness and warmth from what had transpired. He knew the night guaranteed nothing, yet it marked a point beyond which their story could not return to its former state. After that first night, a new cautious rhythm settled between Jakub and Mary. Every Monday, when Mary returned to the dorm, they exchanged messages again, quietly checking in, sharing small details of study and life without pressure or expectation. Friday evenings resumed their ritual, meetings they anticipated all week. Evening began with chatter about small things, the week, assignments, funny stories. Sometimes they simply sat in silence, feeling warmth, allowing feelings to manifest without words. Every touch was cautious, every gesture a quiet confirmation of trust. The following Friday meeting brought slightly more freedom. Mary relaxed, smiled more, occasionally touching Jakub's hand. He responded gently, knowing each detail mattered to her. They wandered the complex grounds, discussing books, films, future plans. Each conversation was a small bridge connecting their hearts. The third Friday meeting was more natural. Jakub again rented the same cottage, and Mary arrived somewhat bolder. She no longer quickly averted her eyes. Her shoulders relaxed. Her smile appeared more often. Sitting side by side, talking, sometimes silent, sometimes laughing softly, a closeness emerged that required no words. The warm night and sounds of the tropical garden created the sense that they inhabited their own separate world.
During these evenings, something more than mere physical closeness occurred. Mary gradually opened to Jakub, trusted him, allowed gentle contact. For Jakub, these were moments where love and care intertwined with responsibility. He felt her inner fragility, respected her space, and slowly accepted each step toward him. Each morning, Mary quietly returned to the dorm, while Jakub stayed alone in the cottage, feeling a mix of emptiness and warmth. These Friday evenings became their anchor, a time to be themselves, trust each other, and build their relationship step by step. But with each passing meeting, Jakub increasingly realized outside the windows of this quiet complex existed another world, the world of Mary's parents, whose control and restrictions remained unchanged. And though things proceeded gently and cautiously, a lingering sense of anxiety never fully left him. These meetings grew increasingly significant. Each Friday was a small victory of trust and closeness, but also a reminder that their story remained fragile and vulnerable, that every next step demanded caution, attention, and understanding.
A week passed after their last meeting. Jakub habitually checked his phone, hoping for at least a short message, a sign Mary was still nearby, that their connection had not been fully severed. Yet the screen remained blank. At first, he explained the silence with studies or chores, then with the sister's busyness, then with her natural caution. But day after day, anxiety sharpened. His heart clenched at every glance at the screen, and memories of her cautious steps toward him, trust and gentle touches resurfaced. Each memory deepened the void inside.
Finally, he opened her contact again and saw what he most feared, a full block. No reply, no hint, no way to reach her. Everything built over weeks, trust, closeness, moments of happiness, vanished instantly. The pain was sharp and cold, but with it came understanding. For Mary and her parents, this path was a choice, an attempt to move toward a safer, more reliable life. Perhaps they were wrong. Perhaps with him, things would have been better. Perhaps he could have gone to the village, tried to change something, given time, and then it could have happened. Yet he realized that any interference would bring only suffering. In such circumstances, trying to reclaim the past would only hurt both her and him. Their story, however fragile and beautiful, had ended. Jakub clenched his fists, took a deep breath, and accepted the bitter truth. Everything between them had become the past, unreachable and final. Yet the memory of her would remain forever, a quiet island in his heart,
where he could keep something impossible to return and learn to let go.